Hello. We made it. We both paused to grab a glass of wine, and we are here. Cheers. What are you
Cheers.
drinking? What did you pour for yourself?
That is such a great question. A rosé of some sort.
Amazing. That's
Yeah.
good enough.
Mm-hmm. That's the
It's gonna
extent of
get the
my
job
wine
done.
knowledge. I'm like, it's pink.
It matches my outfit. That's good enough.
Exactly. That's what I look for in a drink.
A beverage that matches the aesthetic.
Yeah. What are you drinking tonight?
This is an Uni Blanc, but it's basically just bougie white wine. That's nothing too special about it.
Love it.
We are here to discuss whatever thoughts we may have about. You grabbed it. Does my body offend you? Even though I read the audiobook, but I own it.
I got it on my Kindle. Hold on, let me. Here.
Nice. Ooh. Ooh, wow. Is that your Kindle or is that a book?
It's my Kindle.
Oh my gosh, I thought that was like a fancy book, but it's a fancy case for your Kindle.
It's a fancy case for my Kindle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love it. Amazing.
I just like to be a little bit extra, you know.
Love the extra. Okay, you just told me backstage that you finished it today, which is usually me. Usually I'm the one that's like, yeah, I just finished it 10 minutes ago. So I know that life. I think I finished it a few days ago, like maybe like Sunday. But it's still pretty fresh. Do you have a star rating yet?
Well, so I don't give star ratings to books. I'm on a star rating ban because I gave Ice Planet Barbarians 5 stars. I also gave other books 5 stars that have a lot more meaning than Ice Planet Barbarians. So yeah, I don't believe in star ratings. But like
I love it.
Initial like kind of reaction was I really liked it. I liked that it covered a variety of topics. At times it felt a little unfocused, but
agreed.
For the most part, like I really enjoyed reading it. Yeah.
What about an emoji? Would you give it an emoji rating?
Ooh.
Of just based on vibes?
Oh, an emoji. I mean, I feel like it has to be the dancing, like, red dress lady.
I like it.
You know, like that's the vibe of the book. Especially the ending.
I like it.
Yeah. What did you
the ending
rate
for
it?
sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm going with a 4-star rating.
Nice.
And I think the emoji that comes to mind is just like the dress, like the green dress emoji.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it's like all just dress codes and all of that.
Oh yeah. I mean, the whole clothes is the theme of the book, so.
Yes. I thought I was going to be late, but I'm not. Yeah, no, you're just perfectly on time.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't read the book. Happy to join the discussion for Disco Book Club. 2 of the prerequisite 3 beverages. I do have 2. I only have 2. But that's okay. Roro is here.
Water over there.
You've got 1 plus.
Yeah.
Stay hydrated.
Yeah.
Hydrate or dihydrate. Am I right?
Am I right?
Am I right, ladies? Can I get a hey-o? I'm in a weird mood today.
Good.
It's a weird day.
I love it.
Okay. What do we think? What were your thoughts? Did we like the characters? Did we like the situation, the predicaments?
Yeah, I mean, so much of it definitely felt realistic. There was never any point where I was like, that wouldn't happen. Like, so much of it was like, yeah, I could totally see that. I liked the characters' like overall journey too, because I feel like both of them had a really good arc of learning. Yeah, there was definitely times where because you get that dual POV, there's always going to be times where I'm like, we know stuff that the other characters don't know, especially like when Ruby was going through some stuff. I was just like, oh gosh, if you guys just talk to each other, things would be better.
Yeah, that got really hard. And also it was 2 authors. And like they each wrote one POV, which I thought was so cool and made the writing super unique, because like even though I read it on audiobook and it was 2 different narrators, it still felt like so distinct being in Ruby's head versus Melena's head, like completely 2 different voices, which I thought was awesome.
Oh yeah, they definitely both had their own like ways of thinking, and that definitely helped with the 2 authors' style for sure.
Yes, I know they talked about that in their acknowledgements or author's note. They were like, oh, we were sisters by choice and we're both writers and we wrote this. Like, it was just like very warm fuzzies how they decided to write it together. I thought was so cute.
Yeah, so it was hard not to compare this book to what is it? I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. Have you heard of that one?
No.
Okay, it's not same situation, but similar, where it's like 2 authors and it's the characters are white, one's black, and they like are trying to like get their way home after a school shooting.
Man.
Yeah, and so it was like it had similar vibes to that, where it was like, okay, yeah, different situation, but still same.
Yeah, I mean, and that was something that was such a big part of this book, was there's this one circumstance of, you know, okay, Melena gets dress coded, and then Ruby, the little baby upper class white feminist, is like, we have to fight for justice. And Melena's like, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Like, why are you in my business? And they both navigate it so differently depending on like their experiences and their history and their family and their race and everything, which I thought was just so complex, and getting to see from both perspectives, being in each of their heads of like each of them coming to terms with things in the book. I don't know if I'm going in and out, if I have like crappy Wi-Fi right now.
I also don't have great Wi-Fi, so
it's just the country living, but I don't know. We deal with it.
Oh yeah.
But I did love that we got their 2 different perspectives, as they also both felt like truly teenagers, which I really liked in YA.
Absolutely. Yeah, they definitely both, like, the things that they are worried about, and also like, you know, when you're a teenager, like emotions are heightened to like the absolute extreme. And so seeing, like, especially with Ruby, her immediate reaction to everything before she's had time to like mature and take those moments of like stepping back and thinking about things, it's such like a very like teenager reaction for sure.
Yes. Yeah, Ruby in particular, like she even says, oh, I have such a temper. And it's like, girl, what do you have to be angry about? Like, she just goes off on on anything because she can.
Yeah.
And that starts to be reflected back at her when she meets like Melena and Carlos, where they're like, why do you get so riled up? Like, you know that we can't do that. Like, because you're a white girl, you could kind of get away with getting riled up about all these things and no one is gonna like really bring a consequence to you. I think Carlos said something along those lines to her of like, you've never known a consequence in your life, and that makes her like, what? I know consequences.
Yeah.
But she has this arc where it's like slowly learning about things from seeing things through other people's lenses that I thought was a really, really cool journey for her.
Yeah, that's especially seeing at the very beginning when Ruby first like approaches Milena at Carlos's car. Ruby like immediately takes note of how like calm, cool, and collected Carlos is, even though like she can tell he's angry. And it's definitely a survival instinct that Carlos has had to learn, that Ruby starts to develop throughout.
Yeah, she starts to get a little bit more like context and awareness of it over time, where in the beginning she's like, how come I'm the only one that's angry? And the other characters are like, because not all of us can afford to be so outwardly angry like that, which is a great lesson for her. I really liked Ruby's arc because she comes from this like well-off liberal family. She's like, I'm from Seattle, and everyone, the whole book is like, of course you are. That checks out. Of course you're the girl from Seattle that is now in Florida. And there's even a point in the book where someone is like, you know that you're rich, right? And Ruby's like, no, we're not. My dad just took an early retirement and they're on a second honeymoon in Europe. And my sister, and the other character is like, yeah, that means you're rich.
I think that was Carlos that called her out on that one.
Yeah. And so she has this journey of like going from very like girl boss white feminism to a more like intersectional approach in her little like baby feminism 16-year-old world. And that was really cool to watch unfold.
Yeah. I also thought it was interesting, like with Milena, her whole journey with learning about like feminism and social justice, because a lot of the stuff is just stuff that she has had to know because that's just her life of like wanting to make sure like she isn't as reactionary because she doesn't want to come off as the, you know, angry Latina and all of that. And then she starts learning like the words for it. And I think that that was a really interesting journey as well.
Yes, I love when they start planning the protests and they're all Googling and they're all researching, and at one point someone says the phrase internalized misogyny and we get Milena's like inner monologue and she's like, oh, I just learned what that meant. Like I just learned what that means last week in my research. It was like this really cute moment, but also like, oh yeah, like you're getting to slowly see her put names to things for things that she's always felt or experienced but hasn't had the words or the tools to really address, which was also really cool to see kind of unfold.
Yeah, I definitely think that Milena's journey is a lot more subtle than Ruby's.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Also, we are talking about Does My Body Offend You by Mayra Cuevas and Marie Marquardt. In case you were curious, it's a YA contemporary. It was an interesting time. But I think you're right that like Ruby's journey was very loud, and Milena's is a lot like she does a lot at home. She does a lot on her own. She does a lot like of her own little research and a lot of like mental, emotional processing by herself. And I think that speaks to their characters and also to the way that they were raised. Like Ruby has this family. She even talks about like her dad is almost exhausting and how he gives these like, you go girl, like pep talks. And she's like, okay, dad, like cool it. Meanwhile, Milena, like her mom is super supportive, but she has her Tia Lorna, I think it was. And it's like Tia Lorna always has an opinion and is a little bit more conservative. Same with her abuela. And it's like, she knows that she has to be a little bit more cautious and really choose her words carefully and kind of keep a little bit more guarded in some ways. And it was like seeing those two next to each other, I thought spoke volumes and ended up being super powerful.
Yeah. And especially with like Melena's like relationship with her mom, and seeing kind of her mom having to deal with things of she's aware that things are not right, but she also doesn't have to, like, she's constantly working these like 12-hour days at the hospital, and she doesn't have the time to like go out of her way to fight these things. She has to just kind of survive, especially after losing their home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And while her father is away, and like Melena's mom is almost like basically a single parent home in the meantime, she's like working these long shifts, and we get the sense of their relationship is so supportive and loving, but also her mom is so protective of her, like with the social media accounts and the journalists and everything. Her mom is super hesitant because she's like, look, I don't have the time to help you with this, and I just want you to be safe. I want to protect you from what I know, could be really ugly out in the real world with all of these people that would cause you harm. And meanwhile, Ruby's family, one, is like supportive almost to a fault, and two, doesn't always see the harm that could come to Melena because of their different race and their different body types. And that's something that Ruby learns really quick, how different it really is.
Yeah. Well, and just looking at their families in general, because like Ruby's family is very supportive, but they aren't as like involved as Melena's family. Like, her parents are off on their like second honeymoon / going to visit Olive, but they like aren't really there. They aren't listening to like what Ruby has to say, versus looking at Melena's family, it's like, yes, her mom is basically like acting as a single mother at the time, but they also have like their tia and their abuela and everything are there, and you constantly see Melena's family around. So even like, though they might not come off as like supportive, they are like present in her life, which is a really interesting comparison.
Yeah. I love that we got like so clearly a sense of two like super different family cultures, because you have Melena's family who's constantly always all together. They're always making meals together. Every decision is a family decision. Every piece of information is everyone's information. And then you have Ruby, where it's really just her and her Nana. And it's almost like I have to talk to my sister. Like, oh God, okay, my weekly phone call with my parents. And even then it's very like, we love you, we support you. It's not like they really know much about what's going on in her world or like her day-to-day. And you get the sense that like there is this sense of like unsettled, almost loneliness that Ruby is dealing with, especially in the shadow of her big sister and the expectations from her parents that she doesn't really know how to talk to them about because they're not around. That is kind of weighing down on her. And then you see Melena, who's always around her family, and she knows that they love her without conditions. I really liked seeing both of those a lot.
Yeah. And it was also interesting seeing like Melena's relationship with her cousins.
Yes.
Which is definitely also the very like cultural thing, is being so like involved with like cousins, and they're basically siblings at that point.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, I loved Carlos and Zoraida too. I thought was a really, really awesome character, but Carlos just continued to surprise me, which is I think the point, and that's kind of the same trajectory that Ruby has with him too. And Melena is like, what did you assume about him? And you have this moment of like, oh yeah, no, you got me. You're right. Like he is all of these things, but at the same time has his own like internalized gunk that he's working on over the course of the story. I like that we got like a little subplot of everyone along the way, but I think Carlos might have been my favorite character.
Yeah, Carlos was definitely the most like developed secondary character. Compared to like Ruby's friends and even like Zoraida, where they like Carlos has his own little journey that he goes on as well. And I liked Ruby's friends, but they were very much more there to support Ruby's story versus having their own. Mm-hmm.
No, they felt more like, it's funny because they just felt like what my friends were like in high school. Like they're just so angsty and so in love, and they're like, I just have to get out of this town. But it felt, I don't know, it didn't feel as like deep or nuanced as Malena's friends and her cousins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you feel about Ruby and Carlos getting together?
You know, I gotta say, when I first picked up the book, I thought I was gonna be queer.
I do too. I really did too.
But as soon as they had their first interaction, I was like, well, they're gonna get together.
Right.
Like as soon as they like had their argument and then we're like going kind of head to head, and they were like super close. It even describes them as being like super close to each other, like basically chest to chest. And I'm like, well, obviously,
of course, the tension,
where we're going. Yeah. So I was a little disappointed. Mostly because I was like, thought this was gonna be, they discover their love for each other along the way, but no.
That would have been the cherry on top for sure.
It really would have. But it's just, I think every story could be a little bit queer, so yeah. I did like them though. I didn't hate them getting together.
I liked that it felt very realistic to me. I liked their characters like getting together and interacting and having the hard conversations about what it would mean for them to be together and to learn things about each other. Like Ruby not knowing Spanish and Carlos having to constantly translate and explain like little nuances of like his Puerto Rican roots to her, and her being like, like, I don't want him to constantly do that, but how can we not do that? Like those little things I thought were really impactful. But I also thought Malena's little empowered romance journey was equally as interesting. What did you make of Malena's arc there?
I wasn't really expecting that. And what was his name?
Javi?
Yes, Javi. I definitely thought like, because there were so many ways that it could turn from when they like have their first, make out session at a party, and I was like, ooh, this could be really, really bad. So I was like pleasantly surprised by that. Yeah, and I liked that it was left kind of open-ended, especially since Malena is like a sophomore versus Ruby being like a senior, and like the age difference between like being 16 to like 17, 18 seems small, but also is big.
When you're a teenager, that's totally. Yeah, I know. I liked that at the end he came to her house and was like, I just want to apologize for anything that I might have made you uncomfortable for. And she gets to have this moment that's like, look, it wasn't you. It wasn't what I wanted. And I don't really have the time to be in a relationship. So no thanks. And he goes, well, let me take you on a date. And she's like, again, no thanks. Like closes the door in his face. I thought it was like a really cool ending for Malena to have this like empowered moment, from going from I want someone's attention to feel empowered versus I don't really it's not really a priority, and I'm not really going to seek it out or make the time for it. It felt very mature from her. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, it definitely showed her maturity from the beginning too, and her like exploration of like empowerment and like what does empowerment mean.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean her whole conversation with Ruby's grandma was also like I really like that, of talking about like, okay, well, being sexually liberated, but also understanding like the power dynamic that is still there. Like no matter what, there is going to be that power dynamic. Yeah,
that was a big conversation. I loved Abuela Joan. As soon as Malena was like, I can't just call her Joan. I know, she's like, I'm gonna call her Abuela Joan. I loved that. It gave me a good giggle every time.
Yeah.
Speaking of empowerment, I guess we could talk about the actual plot of the book, where Malena goes to school. Right, I know. I'm like, oh, how have we avoided this? She has a sunburn on her back and is like painful to wear a bra. Her mom, the nurse, is like, oh yeah, no, you're burned. Like that looks painful. Malena wants to stay home from school. Her mom is like, whatever, they're just breasts. Just don't wear a bra. Who cares? Malena goes to school. She gets dress coded, and then everything spirals from there. And it starts this whole like uprising, the whole protest, the whole let's petition the school board thing. How did you feel like initially, like the unsettled emotions of Malena going through that, like what she calls it, like violating trauma?
Yeah, her like finding that word of like it felt violating, I thought was it. I mean, definitely like thinking back on my high school experience, we had uniforms, but they were like loose uniforms. So it was a lot harder to get dress coded, I would say, where it was really like the, length of shorts and like, do you have a collar on your shirt type deal. But it also like every single time someone did get dress coded, and most of the time it was a female was getting dress coded, they would like have to remove them from class. They'd have to change into like a giant t-shirt of shame that says loner on the back of it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was like very clear, like, oh, this person violated the dress code. And like having that so public, and like for Malena, she like gets examined by a teacher or the assistant principal and the school nurse to such like excruciating detail, and like having even Ruby describing like watching them scan her body, like absolutely crazy, but also like something I can see happening.
Oh yeah. Just I thought that scene was powerful from Ruby's point of view, because you see like a third party person who doesn't know what's going on being like, why are there these two grown women like looking at this poor girl whose expression is like of pure embarrassment and defeat, like what is happening? And they're walking around and they're like we really get the confusion and the like disturbing vibes from Ruby. And then Malena is like so shrunken into herself, just like thinking of her Malena the first quarter of the book to Malena at the end is like, she even describes it as, I feel like I got my voice back by the end, but she is so beaten down and embarrassed and ashamed that it's just unbearable for her, that she doesn't even want Ruby to like stick her nose in it. She's like, look, I can't get detention. So Ruby convinces her not to wear the stupid panty liners with tape that the nurse tells her to, put those over your nipples. No one will see. Ruby's like, there's nothing about bras in the dress code. You don't have to do that. So Malena goes, okay, whatever. And then they find out that she didn't put the things on. And then Malena gets detention. And because of like her family situation, she has to get, like, they figure out, shuffle the schedule around so that they can pick her up from McDonald's after detention every day. And it ends up being an inconvenience for her entire family that Malena got dress coded and then sent to detention that Ruby never would have considered.
Yeah, I mean, you have Ruby who has her own car and doesn't really have to worry about more than just like herself. And she's so much of a, like, anything that happens, it just affects me. It doesn't affect everyone around me. Versus Malena, she has to think about the fact that, well, if I get detention or if I'm even late to Carlos picking me up, then he's going to be late for practice, which could affect his entire career, which they all moved all the way from Puerto Rico for his baseball career. Like, it's so many things all stacked on top of each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Ruby just casually is like, I can give you a ride. And Malena's like, I don't know if she was serious. Like, how does she know how helpful that would be? Like, should I ask? Is that like a pride thing? And she's like all overthinking it. When Ruby really just has like no idea. But at first Malena is like, I don't want to do anything. Like, yeah, take a picture or whatever, but I don't, like, I'm just trying to live my life and not cause a stir. I don't want to be the angry Latina. And then Ruby texts her friend, and that friend, without Malena's consent, posts the pictures of Malena's sunburnt back and the story of how she got dress coded in detention on Twitter for all to see.
That moment in particular, like, stood out to me, of her friend who, very clearly comes from the Pacific Northwest, so definitely a more liberal area, and doesn't even think twice about sharing some stranger's photo on the internet. Like,
yeah. I mean, she was even so blasé about it when they eventually reached out to her. Like, they got on Skype or something, like, later on when they're organizing, and she's like, like, I didn't think about it. I mean, I started it for you. You're welcome.
Yeah.
And Malena's like, okay. Like, this really messed up a lot, for Malena, like her privacy, and also the response that she was getting versus the response that Ruby was getting, that Carlos had to really explain and spell out for her how different it is. And that was a huge moment too.
Yeah, that was, again, Ruby very much focused on self, and her being like, this sucks, but look at all this great attention we're getting, and people are so supportive, and not even thinking about any sort of backlash that Malena would get. And then just the differences in the comments, because there is a difference between a girl who is, white and smaller and does, she can just wear a shirt without a bra or anything and no one's gonna notice. She had to like tell the nurse that she was wearing a bra.
Literally had to ask for detention.
Be like, you're going to give me detention now. Which is just, of course she didn't think about the fact that Malena, who is, bigger, and she has bigger breasts, and she is just bigger in general. Plus, on top of that, all the comments of like, go back to your country, which Puerto Rico is, of course, still in America.
Right. And just pure disgustingness. But I mean, the very different tone that Ruby was completely oblivious to, being like, look, I mean, sorry we didn't ask you, but the response is so great. And Carlos is like, yeah, why don't you look
reporter.
at right, yeah. Carlos goes, that's so cute, Ruby. Why don't you look at Melena's phone? And then she just like sinks as she like reads these disgusting messages that Melena was receiving. I think did a really good job of illustrating so early in the book of like how different they were, but at the same time how they tried to commit to understanding each other and banding together, because after that they're like, okay, what do we do? And they end up talking to the reporter. That gets published and it becomes this big thing that they decide, okay, we're going to plan a walkout, we're going to have people sign a petition, we're going to talk to the school board and get this dress code shaped up and fixed. They can't do this to us. And then more chaos happens.
Oh yeah. I mean, looking at even when they start collecting the signatures for the petition, and getting that from, again, Ruby's perspective of just getting signatures for the sake of signatures versus like actually getting people who are supporting the cause. Looking at how she like didn't even really understand what she was asking for, just that she was asking for something. Because she was even okay with getting the signatures from like people who are like, oh, so I can wear my Second Amendment t-shirt, but then not having the discussion with the kids from the like it was the Black Student Union Club, and
something about, like that,
not talking about like the intersectionality of the dress code.
Yeah, and she's kind of aggravated by that when she's first in the parking lot trying to get signatures, and people are like, well, what about this? Did you think about this? Like, what about this? And she's like, ugh, like, we're trying to do something here. Like, just sign it. Like, we can't do everything. And then at the end, when she's like going on a rant to the school board and is like, abolish the dress code. Was that Melena or was that one of the other characters that kind of put her in her place and was like, did you even think that what that would mean?
I think it was Melena,
yeah, where it's like, had they gone with your idea and anyone could just wear whatever offensive, horrible shit they wanted to school, like that, of course that didn't cross your mind. Of course you wouldn't have thought about anything past, oh, not wearing a bra. Like, did you think about the intersectionality? And Ruby has this full circle moment thinking about, oh yeah, when I was asking about signatures, they asked about that, and I was annoyed that they were asking about that.
Yeah, that was, I really like that we had that callback moment, because when they did say that, I think it was Melena who had said that. I was like, that was exactly what was going to happen with freaking lacrosse players. Screw the lacrosse players.
Yeah, those were lacrosse players. Well, I mean, and I think part of the callback was in Melena's project at the end of the book where she's like, wear your detention outfit, and then something that you feel like empowered in. She has all these people that got dress coded for whatever reason show up in their detention outfit. And it's like a lot of these non-white men and boys that were sent to detention or got dress coded for wearing like a hoodie. And Ruby is like, oh, but it's just a hoodie. And all of the like white jocks and sports players wear hoodies. And Melena's like, yeah, so do the brown kids and the black kids, but they get sent, like they get dress coded for that. And it was kind of that same callback of like different bodies like are perceived differently in different clothing or the same clothing. Unpack it, Ruby, and she's constantly being like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. It's kind of the theme of the book.
It really was.
Yeah. Ruby being like, white privilege? What?
White savior?
I'm from Seattle. Yeah, right. Yeah, which they talk about with Ruby's sister Olive, Carlos has to be like, did you ever think that maybe like Olive should be asking the community where she teaches if they want her to solve those problems, or did she just go in and fix things for them? And Ruby is like, I don't know. She fixed it. And then Olive later is like, oh, everyone else at the school hates me because they think I'm just like a white savior. Ooh. Girl.
Yikes. Yeah.
Big yikes. Big yikes. There was like so much, and I thought it was such a good book. Like I wish that I had this as an actual high schooler, because a trope, or I should say a setting that I usually hate, like I just don't like books set in high school. That usually turns me off right away. But this felt so grounded to me, which with such like tangible themes and commentary, as opposed to like high school romance. Those are the types of books that I just cannot stomach. But this I would have really valued, and I think it would have given me so much to think about in my privileged little, primarily white suburban community in high school, that I could have graduated a few extra steps in my, my early baby feminism. And I'm glad that it exists now for high schoolers for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to like the books that I had in high school, it was like the John Green books. These weren't really the books that we had available to us. So I'm glad that the kids these days are getting these types of stories that they're able to look at and read, relate to.
Yeah, from like the themes in them, and also like the representation in them, and just everything. I'm like, wow, I love that teenagers can read this right now and have it actually mean something.
Yeah.
As opposed to the crap that I was reading in high school 10 years ago. What was I doing?
Oh, yeah, the Vampire Diaries, what was it? City of Bones shenanigans.
The Twilight era, yeah. Oh, gosh.
Oh yeah.
Good times.
Speaking of, but the height, like, I just love that Ruby is obsessed with Nick Jonas.
Oh my god, and yeah, that was such a random thing to drop in there.
So random.
I loved it. Like, of course she is.
Like,
she had, like,
and you're all going to come to this Nick Jonas concert with me. I was like, wow, relatable.
We went there. I loved it. And I love that she bonded with like Carlos's baseball team manager or something, because Carlos wanted to go because he likes Ruby, but then he's like, well, if I go, then my study buddy or something has to go. And they ended up hitting it off because she also loves Nick Jonas. It was just such
Nick Jonas, it brings people together.
Yeah, right. There was like a couple other things like that was so, like the pop culture references I'm usually not crazy about either, but that one really, really got me. And there was one other one, I can't, maybe it'll come to me later, but it was some kind of other like pop culture reference that just gave me a giggle.
I'm trying to think. I mean, so they were talked about because Carlos loved what's his name? That one movie with the car.
Oh shoot.
Is it Clint Eastwood?
Maybe.
I don't remember. I know they talked about the movie and I was like, I have not seen this movie. I do not know what you guys are talking about, but that's fine.
Man. What else? Do you have anything else on your brain, or anything we haven't really talked about yet?
I mean, I get like one of the things that I was definitely thinking about was the like moment where Ruby, when she's, they're doing their walkout protest and there's like a crush of bodies and she essentially gets assaulted during this, what's supposed to be like the most empowering moment of her life thus far.
Yeah.
Yeah, what were your thoughts on that moment? Because there's so many times where I'm like, is an assault necessary? Does it serve the story?
Right, because like that's always my thing too. Is like, did she, like, was that necessary for her character development, you know? And I think the point of it was it's never necessary. Like it just it happens in a protest and a walk for empowerment and taking back your own body. It can happen surrounded by people smashed in a hallway. It can happen to a skinny white girl with no boobs to speak of. It can happen. And I thought for that reason, I thought it was a powerful statement for Ruby to feel like this was supposed to be her safe space. Is kind of a theme that gets thrown around a lot. And what could be a safer space for Ruby than surrounded by protesters that share her same thoughts, and surrounded by all her friends, and they're all feeling so good about everything. And even then, it can all come crashing down in a moment that haunts her for the rest of the book and far in the future. There's other characters that eventually she confides in that are like, yeah, it never leaves. It never goes away. And so while I'm never crazy about that, obviously being in a book or happening to anyone, I thought it was a powerful message to say that, yeah, even in a high school hallway surrounded by people in a protest, assault can still go on and be perpetuated. And Ruby, even then, was made to feel like so small, and she felt so ashamed and like so alone in her feelings that later she can't even speak into the megaphone, and she sees that like Milena and her friends are just like so lit up and empowered, and Ruby is just reeling, like unable to even really believe that, like, how could this have just happened to me?
Yeah, I mean, even when she knows like it's not her fault, and these are all things that she's like can tell everyone else, and she can be like, yes, it you know, things like that is a big deal. But then of course it happens to her, and she's like, but was it me? Was it like, is it a big deal? Am I making it something it's not? And seeing like those thoughts and those doubts of even someone who is like educated in things like, you know, assault, even seeing her have those thought spirals, and then how it affects her interactions all throughout the book, with Carlos, with Milena, with even her grandma.
Because like that night we see Ruby, she's like in the bathtub and she's like scrubbed herself raw where a person touched her, and she's like, I can't get clean enough, like I'm scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing. And Carlos texts her the picture of Milena like in a chicken fight in a wet t-shirt, drunk at this party, and Ruby freaks out, one, because she's like, this isn't safe, like what happened to me could happen to anyone, it could happen to Milena, is she safe? I don't know. And she kind of just goes off with Carlos. And later, you know, I mean, Milena is understandably offended by everyone's reaction, like coming to her rescue, dragging her out of there. And later they all explain, like, look, like we were worried about you, and also I was literally in the tub trying to scrub away the sensation of where this person touched me, and then I got this picture of you, and I was fearful, you know, of anything happening to you. I would never wish anything like this happening to anyone else. And it's this great reckoning and understanding, and you know, they all hugged and lived happily ever after.
Slipped off into the sunset with a better understanding of themselves and each other.
The friends we made along the way.
Maybe the bodies are the friends. The bodies,
yes. Ruby says something to Milena that is, it like comes out so horrible, of like, oh, because, you know, because bodies like yours are different than bodies like mine. And Milena is like, what the fuck did you just say to me? Not knowing that Ruby was just assaulted in the middle of a hallway where no one was drunk, and it's like Ruby is just so full of fear for her friend, but she hasn't like explained it and doesn't really have the words to say anything yet. It was like such a hard, that whole part of the book where Ruby is just holding it herself was really hard.
Yeah, and I'm very curious because there's so much that we do get to see, but so much that we don't get to see. Of like I hope Ruby goes to therapy after this,
right?
And I like, you know, hope she does. Like she does eventually tell Carlos, who can tell something is wrong, but like doesn't push. Sweet Carlos,
sweet baby Carlos, bless him.
Bless him.
Well, I mean, they do say a part of what sent Ruby over the edge at the board meeting is that she hears that voice. She's like, I didn't see him, but I would recognize that voice anywhere. And it like, what's the word? Not catcall, but is like, says something in the board meeting so where she can recognize, oh, yeah, heckles her. And when telling the whole story to her Nana and to Milena, they're like, well, we can use that and we can get witnesses. And the assistant principal, where she finally tells her what happened, and they're like, okay, we can put a case together. Like we have information, we can find other students that were in the hallway. So there is this sense of action, sense of hope, I think, that there could be some justice, but it still is a very much like left unsaid.
Which for a lot of things like that, unfortunately, so many people don't get their justice and their reckoning, and
right. It just stays like, oh, we don't have the witnesses, we don't have the whatever exactly. Yeah. So unfortunately, I found that to be grossly realistic as well.
Yeah, so much of it was just very like, it was very grounded, and it was very there was definitely times where it was like, we are covering so many topics in this very short
Yes, I know. I was kind of amazed. The audiobook was like 12 hours. And I remember thinking, because this is like the only not sci-fi book on my TBR in September. And so I just finished a sci-fi before that was like 9 or 10 hours. And I started this audiobook and saw it was 12 and was like, how is this YA contemporary possibly longer than like the conclusion to this like space opera sci-fi trilogy? And then we got into it, and it's talking about all of these different heavy things, and I realized
many things,
so many
things.
I feel like it did pretty good though, as far as like 2 authors, 2 POVs with high school students and so much going on. I felt like the execution was pretty solid.
It definitely, like, even though both of the POVs and the authors had their distinct voices, it still flowed very seamlessly. And there was never a moment where it was like, oh, this is clearly different than the rest of the story. So, it
was definitely the odd one out this month. I finished it and went right back into another sci-fi the last couple of days. But I think probably that's part of the reason too that it really sticks out for me. Like it felt like such a unique and distinct read, because it, compared to everything else I'm reading right now, it was so different. But I think, I don't know, it is like a standout YA for me. I don't read a lot of YA anymore in general, especially YA contemporary. So I was very honestly, like, pleasantly surprised overall by the book.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of what I read now is purely romance. So reading something where it's like the romance isn't the sole focus of the book, there is some romance in it, but it isn't the sole focus of the book. And definitely like young adult, most of what I read now is going to be like adult romance. So yeah, but it's still just as like powerful and just as like, I wouldn't say it wasn't as deep as any adult book could be.
Yeah. Oh no, it didn't shy away from anything. And I also feel like it really held its readers' hands, considering it's for a younger audience. Mm-hmm. I felt like it was still like it still had lots to say.
Yeah, I appreciated that the teenagers talked like teenagers too.
Yes. They weren't like 30-year-olds and 15-year-old bodies.
Yeah, they weren't too old or like too young sounding, because I've had that sometimes where you're like, they're like 16, 17, they cuss.
Right.
They, you know, they don't say, you know, I don't even know, but they say boobs, they say, you know, chest, they say breasts, they say, it's not trying to work around the words or anything.
Yeah, they did feel like appropriately aged for the characters, for the ages that they were. That reminded me, I think, maybe what I was trying to think of was Ruby's attempts not to swear, and how even other people would be like, why do you talk like that? Like, just say fuck. And she'd be like, it's because I promised my grandma, which was
promised my grandma not to.
Yeah, it almost felt like poking fun at other YA. That's like,
when they come up with the weirdest, like, it's YA fantasies are the worst for that too. Well, where they'll say some weird word that's like almost a cuss word, but not.
I'm trying to remember what I read. This is so different from what we're talking about, but I read an arc of lore like 2 years ago, maybe, when before lore came out, and in the arc, the word is fuck. Like, it's just the normal swear word, and someone later in like a book club discussion was like, why did they keep saying, like, why couldn't they just say the swear word? Like, why did they have to make up the swear word? And I'm thinking like, oh, they did, but the editors must have changed it for publication.
Those editors.
I know. Like, why? Because that would totally take you out. Like, no teenager under the stress of like fantasy situations and mortal peril is going to be like, oh, heck. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Oh,
like,
dang, nabbit.
Darn. Jeepers.
Jeepers. Yeah. Adult romances. Are you going to take the Bake Off nanny? Listen, maybe. I've never actually finished NaNoWriMo. I'm always like, I'm gonna do NaNoWriMo this year, and then I don't. But maybe this is the year. Do you watch Great British Bake Off, Noelle?
No, it's been on my list for years and years, but I've never actually.
This is a great season to start. This season just started.
I do love cooking shows.
Yeah, it just started. There's only 2 episodes so far. There is a very attractive man with tattoos and is like a fitness guy, but he's a nanny and he bakes.
Oh my God.
I'm like obsessed. Yeah.
That sounds like the perfect NaNoWriMo project. And also, now that you've told me that you have dabbled in NaNoWriMo, you're going to regret this. I will be bullying you into NaNoWriMo this year. It's too late. It's too late.
Maybe this is the year. Oh, we're gonna try and turn my computer's like, you're at 5%. I'm like, but you're plugged in. Why are you not charging? Oh, because I have the wrong thing plugged in. What is that?
Jiminy Christmas. That's a classic.
Jiminy Christmas. That's definitely a classic. I'm trying to think. I can't even remember which fantasy this was, but there was definitely like a YA fantasy. Oh, we're plugged in. We have power. Where it was a skiff. They used like, instead of saying like, ah shit, they would say, oh, skiff. And you're like, what the fuck does that mean? Like,
I hate it. I hate it.
So bad.
God. This is so funny. I am gonna watch Bake Off. I'm gonna do it. But this just reminded me that Wes got me into recently, which is a show that I never heard of. I can't believe it's real, but it's basically Chopped, like the show Chopped, except instead of amateur home chefs in this high stakes cooking show, it's amateur home blacksmiths making swords in the exact formula of Chopped. Yeah, it's called Forged by Fire.
What?
Yeah, it's called Forged by Fire, I think. And it's the most hilarious shit I've ever seen in my life. It is so entertaining. There's like 7 seasons. First of all, how are there that many like at home blacksmiths?
Amateur blacksmiths, yeah.
They're like, all right, smiths, this is your metal and these are your parameters. And you have 3 hours to complete this knife. And then they're just set loose in this. It's so funny. It's so funny. It's so good. I'm obsessed.
I'm going to have to check this out because that sounds so good.
It is my current obsession. It brings me way too much joy. The first time we watched it, we were both definitely under the influence of community standard violations. And I was just sitting there. We were like 3 episodes deep, and I'm like, how is this real? Like, this is how are there grown men on TV hammering away trying to make a sword with 3 other competitors? It's the funniest thing. And I will be watching more tonight.
I'm definitely going to be checking that out because that sounds incredible.
Yes.
Wow.
A very good time. Smeg.
Ooh.
My favorite insert curse word though is from Adventure Time, and they use the word math and mathing as a swear word, which I think is just the funniest. Like you can't top that. They'll be like, "What the math?"
Yeah. I love that. I would use math as a swear word too.
Mm-hmm. I like math, and I still think it's too funny. Also, no, like it should be, but
I mean,
here we are.
Can't wait to watch the spin-off of that. Read
the law of the internet.
I bet there's. I mean, there should be a great like a book, like just a really two blacksmiths. Maybe I should write that for NaNoWriMo.
You should.
So many books where I'm like, yeah, this is the book that I would write.
I'm in the phase right now where I need to decide. I have to figure out what I'm committing to so that I can plan it in October. Mm-hmm. So, same. So many ideas.
Yum.
British flower fight. No, but I will look into it.
Yeah. That sounds like
I do love good times. But we've gotten a little bit off track. But,
just a little bit.
NaNoWriMo plans. I know. I need to get serious about it. Is there anything else that comes to your mind on Does My Body Offend You? Or do you feel like we've kind of talked about everything?
I'm trying to think like what other. I mean, we talked about like the family, the characters. So much of it was very just character driven, and even though there are all these like external circumstances, so much of it was because of the choices the characters made, which I like that little discussion that they had at the end of like, if you hadn't gotten your period, or I had just stayed home that day, or whatever. All of their choices is what brought them together.
Mm-hmm. I like that too. It felt a little cheesy, but I liked it. Like, that's a conversation that actual high schoolers would have in their little existentialist brains. Like, what if I did wear a bra that day and we'd never be friends? Like,
we'd never be friends.
Yeah, we never would have met. It felt very high school to me, which I loved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, wow. Thank you for reading and discussing and doing the whole thing with me. It was a treasure and a
Thank
joy.
you for having me. I had a great time reading the book. Definitely one that I might not have picked up on my own, so always a good time.
Yeah, me either. Otherwise, I would have just read more sci-fi this month, probably. So.
Yeah.
Pushing me out of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Well, for the rest of the party people, I will be back in a couple of weeks with Christine from Rumi's Digest for September's book, which is The Monsters We Defy, which is more back in my comfort zone of like fantasy heist situation. Otherwise, next week is also happy hour on Wednesday with Jan, or you can find me and Katherine around on the internet. You know, everything is below. Yay!
Yay! I'm around.
We're here talking about stuff.
Oh, yeah.